Sagas, and Haudenosaunee peoples. So I'm grateful to those First Nations for sharing the land and acknowledging that my existing on that land is the result of settler colonial violence along historical and still contemporary process that involves the prison industrial complex. In dreaming of this event, our team was inspired by words adapted from Project Mia. Abolitionist futures are not compatible with white supremacy, settler colonialism, misogyny, heterosexism, transphobia, ableism, and classism. Yet these systems of oppression are all around us and affect even this space. The hope our team has for this session is that organizers, presenters, and participants, particularly those of us who carry a lot of privilege, are mindful of the differential impacts of power and have the courage to hold to account anyone here who exercises power in ways that enact harm. If one of our organizers removes you from this session, our intention is not to punish nor to exclude you, but to practice care for the abolitionist community that we are building. So today you're coming in for a session called Beloved Beyond Policing, How to Create Community Systems of Accountability and Transformation. This is a workshop that was organized by the Alternative Justices Project, which is a radical, decentralized, all-volunteer collective that builds towards consent culture and prison abolition worldwide by developing, implementing, and sharing ways to transform harms that break free from carceral systems and retributive or punitive justice. All yours, Andrea.
That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, Jen. Yeah, my name is Andrea. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be screen sharing for everyone a presentation that one of the founders of Alternative Justice recorded. And I will pause it throughout and kind of moderate a bit to make it a bit more interactive for everyone. Please don't hesitate to let me know if there's anything wrong from a technical standpoint or anything that can be improved. I'll be looking at the chat box quite frequently. Great.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to How to Start Creating Community Systems of Accountability and Transformation, presented by the Alternative Justices Project. My name is Autumn Elizabeth, and I use she, her, or they, them pronouns, and I'm coming at you with some highlighter colored hair, pink, yellow, orange, my signature glitter and purple cat-eyed glasses. And all our presentation materials are teal with white font. So our sort of agenda for this presentation is to start with some acknowledgements. I'll provide a brief introduction to the Alternative Justices Project, and then we'll kind of go into the 5 phases of creating community accountability systems. So phase 1, community dialogues, phase 2, goals, priorities, and critiques, phase 3, implementation and implementation, phase 4, evaluation, and phase 5, evolution. And then we'll just go over some final thoughts. And during a lot of these phases, there'll be time for you to work on sort of your own version of this and really start this process right here today all together, so that this isn't just one more item on any of our to-do lists, and so that we can all be working towards alternative systems of accountability and transformation together. So Briefly and importantly, I'd like to start this presentation with several acknowledgements. This presentation and most of the work of the Alternative Justices Project was created on Ohlone and Tongva land on Turtle Island on what is now known as the United States of America. We've made payments to the Sugoriatea Land Trust, and we encourage others to find information about the traditional stewards of the land and water that y'all occupy and how you might help support the efforts of those stewards. Additionally, our work and much if not all of the work on alternative justices, transformative justice, and restorative justice relies heavily on the often unacknowledged brilliance of Indigenous communities, queer communities of color, comunidades latinas, and many more who were working on these ideas long before white academia, quote, discovered them. So we want to acknowledge their efforts and all of their wisdom. We also hold ourselves at the Alternative Justices Project accountable to and honor those who have directly experienced the harm of incarceration, whose wisdom is often overlooked in the quest for new systems of justice. So we'll be talking about our relationship with them a little bit. I just want to begin this session with great gratitude to those who have come before us, those who are in locked settings, unable to be with us today, and to everyone who's present here now as we come together to really do this work and transform systems. So I'd like to invite everyone to just take a sort of nice deep breath in and out. If you're able, and I would really invite everyone who's watching this and with us today to just do whatever it is you need to do to feel comfortable and take this information in however that feels best for you. So the Alternative Justices Project started from a bunch of community conversations in the Bay Area in 2015. And we work to find, explore, and learn about alternative modes of harm prevention and harm response. We chose to specifically focus our efforts and our implementation specifically on sexual and partner and gender violence. Our community include individuals from all sides of the cycle of harm, so formerly incarcerated people, those affected by incarceration, those who are currently incarcerated, as well as violence survivors, theorists, academics, all sorts. As a result, our community is very diverse. We have a broad range of lived experience that provide valuable insight on harm transformation. And finally, we exist as a decentralized collective, and we try to address harms in our community, specifically by expanding consent cultures, abolishing prisons, and experimenting with alternative systems, and freely sharing what we know. So that's part of what we're doing here today. And we are always trying to share as much information about what we do as possible with as many people as possible, because that's part of how we believe we all come together to create better alternatives. I myself have been involved in the Alternative Justices Project since 2015. I come to this project as a victim survivor of a number of types of sexual and partner violence, and also as someone who perpetrates harm, which is to say that I'm basically human like all of us here today, so I sit on a lot of sides. And I am also, in addition to being a core team member of the Alternative Justice Project, I'm also one of our current stewards who help guide people through various aspects of our processes and, harm responses when things have happened in our communities. So some of our vision for the Alternative Justices Project is to offer alternatives to state systems, to encourage communities to transform oppressive cultures and practices, to create diverse modular strategies for the transformation of both the person who has experienced harm and the person who has done the harming. We also try to respond to requests from those who've been impacted by state-sanctioned legal systems, so incarcerated folks. And we work specifically with the Second Life Project, who they're just really great, and they're another project sort of in our network. We critically reflect on our processes and share our learnings, and we aim to remain a free, decentralized volunteer collective. So these 5 phases that I'm going to talk to y'all about today and that we're going to work with together today are really just our way of distilling the knowledge and information that we've gained in the last 6 years in trying to actually implement community systems of harm, transformation, and accountability. And they are just jumping off points. There are effort, we get a lot of questions at the Alternative Justice Project saying, how do we do what you're doing? How do I make that in our community? Can our community use your project? And we often try to say, each community is so distinct and different, and communities are experts on themselves. And so we want to help communities build their own systems that work for them and do what they need, and leverage their skills and solve their problems. So the first phase of our project, and what we kind of, the first of the 5 phases that we use for people who want to implement these kind of systems, is community dialogue. Nothing in a community really starts without a discussion. And so it's important to figure out where our communities are and where we are as individuals coming together, and before we start making assumptions about how we want to build a system or what kind of system will work. So the 5 big questions to sort of jumpstart a community dialogue on creating sort of police-free systems of accountability and transformation are: who makes up our community and who are we accountable to? What harms are we focusing on? What harms are sort of most present in our community, or what harms do we want to address specifically? Who in our community is already trusted to hold these harms? Why is it important to our community to create alternative justice systems? Who is being negatively impacted by the current systems? And finally, what do we believe as a community about harm, transformation, and punishment? And so we answered a lot of these questions sort of organically in the first conversations the Alternative Justices Project had. And so these are just jumping off points. These are just starting points, and you could have a ton of different questions. So I want to invite everyone to take a few moments and think about your personal answers to these questions, what questions are missing for your community that might foster a better dialogue in your own community around these topics, and write them down. Like right now, write them down, and or voice record them, or whatever method you have, so that at the end of this, our goal is that you leave here with something that feels tangible, so that starting your own project like this, starting your own systems, doesn't feel so daunting.
So I'm going to go ahead and pause there so that we can do what Autumn is recommending and actually take a moment to write down some answers to what these questions might mean for our different communities. I will pause for about 4 to 5 minutes, or 4 to 6 minutes, and give everyone some time to reflect on these and to jot down some thoughts. And throughout this, if you have any questions, or if you feel comfortable sharing some insights that you're having, please do add them to the chat, and we can all kind of collaborate on that. For us, this is a place of learning too, so there might be giant holes in this that we haven't noticed yet. So I'm going to give everyone about 4 to 6 minutes and feel welcome to share anything, and then I'll help us synthesize any learnings or thoughts before we move on to phase 2.
Why won't it let me start right? Oh my god, why is it working? Why can't I spotlight?
We're at about 5 minutes. This, in my opinion, is one of the phases that takes the longest to start to answer. Maybe I'll give everyone 2 more minutes to start writing any thoughts. And I will say a lot of these questions are really, really broad, and you could answer them from a lot of angles. And so I think part of it is actually just kind of sitting with these for a while. In alternative justice, the collective has existed since 2015, as Autumn mentioned, and I think we still find it helpful to return to these questions quite often. So the answers even might change. If anyone has any thoughts on kind of the process of writing through this, or any insights that you'd like to share with the broader group that might be helpful to others, I welcome you to do that in the chat in these final 2 minutes before I continue the presentation with Autumn. Hey, I think it would be great for you to share. Let me see if I can unmute you. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Yeah, and if I say any words that are derogatory, I don't mean them in that sense. I'm hoping to use the kindest words possible. But I currently live in a community where the most significant community member is who is not here. I live in an area that there's a few schools, but it's elder care facilities and various different levels of secured to unsecured mental health resources and housing. And my city and this community that is the larger community of where I live has chosen to put all of these places in one little area, in one little street, and they're little bubbles. And I feel like the elephant in the room are the people who benefit from everyone they don't want to see, everyone they don't want to share resources with, being far from them, where they don't have to interact with them, they don't have to shop at the same grocery store. And I feel like it's very important that who makes up your community. It's who made my community. And then the second issue that I think I don't want to take up time from you, but the other thing that's most interesting in the community I live in now is who doesn't live here, but is here every day. There are people who come into the community and take and cause harm. They don't live here. They drive in, they walk in, they come here to engage in various different harmful activities, and they leave, and they're just taking. Whether they were invited, say to come to someone's house and deliver illegal substances to them, or whatever it is that they're doing, they don't sleep here, and yet they're here at all hours of the day and night, and that's stressful. And I don't feel that they're welcome right next to my bed, right next to my house. I mean, no, go to your neighborhood and do things, but why would someone come here to do things? They have a place, they have a car, they live somewhere. They have more money than the people in this neighborhood. Why would people need to come to this very not resourceful neighborhood and take the resources that are here and the word, how do I say it? Take advantage of people who are already taken advantage of. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Who is visiting my neighborhood and who never comes here? Those to me are important questions.
Thank you so much, A, for sharing those. I jotted them down for us to reflect on too. I think those are fantastic questions for us to be adding, and I think speaks to how difficult it is to even define a community, especially, and there might be other people who have tried to define it or impact it or extract from it. So thank you so much for sharing, and I've noted that even for myself as great reflection points. And I'm gonna keep us going with Autumn now, and then we'll circle back for the reflection points on phase 2. Definitely feel welcome to keep sharing in the chat. Like I said, I think these are great for us to learn from each other as we go along.
So now that we've sort of thought about some of those places where we might start our community dialogues, and envisioning that after you've had your community dialogues in your communities, we move to phase 2, which is goals, priorities, and critiques. And this phase really is a distillation, a simplification, a sort of streamlining of what came out of those community dialogues in phase 1. So first we talk about goals. What are the goals that you have for your project? What matters to the community, and how do we make that an achievable goal? How do we make that a seemingly unachievable goal? How do we make that an impossible goal? What are we trying to do here as a community? What are you trying to do in your communities? With this idea, with this project, with these accountability and transformation systems. So then we move to priorities, which is how will your community prioritize the goals you've come up with? Which ones matter the most? Which ones have the most passion behind them? Which goals have an effect on other goals? Which goals might create a kind of domino effect with one another? Do some of the goals conflict with one another? Do they seem sort of at odds with one another? And how might you live with that ambiguity? How might you live with that conflict? How might you even design for it in your systems and in your projects? And then lastly, sort of critiques, which are about what things does your community critique together? And we found this to be a little easier than identifying sort of affirmative values in our communities, because we're a decentralized feminist collective. We host a range of opinions, solutions, viewpoints, experiences, and we want to honor all of those. But we can all pretty much agree on the parts of the current system that we do not like, and that we want to work against, and that we want to dismantle, and that we want to create alternatives for. And so that helped us feel aligned while still giving us a lot of individual autonomy, freedom, and really honoring our different experiences and viewpoints. So questions like, what aspects of current systems does your community disagree with? What do you all stand or show up for against? What common narratives or systems are harming your community at this time that help you all want to create different systems? So some examples here from our own work. After our conversations, after many community conversations, the goals we kind of came up with as a community were to empower actors to take responsibility for the harms that they felt they've committed, to take the burden off victim survivors, and to uphold the accountable space policy of our communities. And we prioritized these goals in this order. They didn't come out of our conversations in this order, but this is the order we decided to prioritize them in, because empowering actors takes the burden off victim survivors and upholds our accountable space policy. And so that way, the first goal really affects the later goals, and they can help each other. And we use the word accountable space policy instead of a safe space policy, because we as a community aren't 100% sure that any space is safe for everyone, and different spaces feel different for lots of people. So we're more concerned with making sure all of us in our spaces are accountable to each other than we are with creating a safe space. So that's sort of why we use that language of accountable space policies. And then some examples of our shared critiques are, we critique rape culture, victim blaming and re-victimization, punitive measures, systems of oppression, addressing symptoms and not systems, individualism of harm, the bad racist trope, one-size-fits-all solutions, and perfectionism. And we made sure to really define these in length. And you can find a full explanation of our shared critiques on our website at alternativejustices.com/shared critiques. So now I want to invite you all to think through goals, priorities, and critiques. What are some goals you have for your community. If you're here with community members, talk to them, share with each other. What would be your priorities? What do you think your community might prioritize? And, maybe start, a little short list of some possible shared critiques. Hi, everybody. Welcome to How to Start
I'm
Creating
so sorry,
Communities in
everyone.
Community on our website at alternativejustices.com/shared critiques. So now I want to invite you all to think through goals, priorities, and critiques. What are some goals you have for your community? If you're here with community members, talk to them, share with each other. What would be your priorities? What do you think your community might prioritize? And, maybe start, a little short list of some possible shared critiques. What might be some things that you think your community definitely does agree that they don't like. So let's take some time and do a little bit of that work.
So I'm going to pause us there again and give everyone some time to think through those. Let me just jot down where we left off in the video so that I can actually share screen. Or actually, I'm going to go ahead and post the actual prompts back into the chat in case that's helpful. And we'll follow the same format as before. So I'm just gonna put a timer on for about maybe 4 to 5 minutes and then check in, see if anyone wants to share any thoughts that came up. And folks can also discuss through the chat. We'll talk for a few minutes and then we'll continue on to the next phase. So we're at about the 4-minute mark. I'm wondering if anyone has any questions that they'd like to add, similar to the great addition that we had from A during phase 1, or if anyone wants to share any shared critiques. I know, at least for me, sometimes when someone shares something like David did, there can be a bit of a, well, I resonate with that too, type of feeling. So I'll give maybe 2 minutes for anyone who wants to share um, or ask any questions. And it's great too to ask questions that we might not even have the answer to a question. Sometimes just knowing that something's worth pondering can be great. Great, so I'm gonna have us keep going with Autumn's presentation, and then I'm just now reading some of the questions that got put into the chat, and a lot of these I'll also be adding for the end in case we have any time for us all to chat and reflect on additional questions together.
So now that we've done phase 1 of a community dialogue and phase 2 of thinking through our goals and our priorities and our shared critiques as communities, that really helps guide us in so that we can now figure out how we want to implement, how we want to do our community systems of accountability and transformation. And so phase 3 is implementation. So from our experiences, we've kind of distilled 3 big questions that might help your communities decide on how you want to implement, how you want to go about doing the actual doing of accountability and transformation. So the first part is start small. What can we do right now that will start moving us towards one or more of our goals? The second one is use what works. As a community, what types of projects, systems, ideas, events typically flourish? What elements do they share? How can we use similar elements in our efforts here? So this one is really about looking at our skills as different communities and looking at what has already worked in the past and saying, okay, how do we leverage our assets and what makes us work and what drives us as a community towards this new project? And the third kind of big question area is define your time. How much time, energy do we as a community have, and from whom? How long will that energy last? How can we limit our ideas to keep the actions manageable? And this one is about the fact that in our experiences, accountability and transformation work is long, hard work, and it is not a quick fix. It is sort of ongoing. And so acknowledging that and saying, okay, so how much time do we want to commit to this project? What do we think we really have in terms of time and energy, and who's giving that time and energy, and why are they giving it? How do we equalize those burdens? Where is the time coming from, going to? And that almost links back to start small, in the sense of, like, if the time is limited, then the action should be smaller. And if there's a lot of time and energy, if you're talking about a big community with lots of resources, great, you can maybe have bigger actions, but it never hurts to start small and keep it going, because longevity is really key to resilient systems here. And then we just include always this reminder that not to worry about failing. Failure is okay, it's vital. We as a collective have failed many times. We've failed individually as part of a collective, and failure is how we learn, and it's okay. The current system is already failing. So if our systems fail, that's perfectly fine. We at least are working towards different systems. And so I think it's really valuable, because this is often the step where a lot of us feel hesitation. I know I personally have felt hesitation in projects where I'm like, oh, I don't know, like I have goals, I have priorities, I have critiques, I've had conversations, but what do I actually do? And so I think, you know, this is where we get to decide, what do we do? And it can be really small, even as a community, even as a large community, we can decide to do something really small and it still has a huge effect. So some starting points, some places, some ways that we've tried implementation in various forms are things like community mediation of harm, just offering that, like, instead of just person X and person Y sort of really having a conflict, just the two of them, offering that, you know, the community can be involved and that's okay. Readily available lists of police alternatives and help hotlines. This is like a super small action that you can do. Gather the resources that are available already in your community and just share them within our communities more. Encourage people to use them. Offering support for victim survivors in your community. This could look a ton of different ways. This could be monetary, this could be funds for therapy, this could be all kinds of other support, in-person support, over Zoom support. Any kind of support is fine, what fits your community. And then one thing that we also do is we create support for those who support victim survivors. Often this is a task that is sort of falls specifically to some specific people in your community. You can probably identify them. They're the ones who are already hearing about harms in your community. And how can you support them? We also have worked with transformation support groups. We offer these for people who are survivors of harm. We offer those for people who have harmed people, which is to say all of us in both groups. But these are really vital things. Monthly conversations about consent, harm, and transformation. Maybe those community dialogues are really working for your community, really bringing up some stuff, and that's what you want to focus on. So you keep having monthly conversations about this stuff. Maybe you try a community hotline or a community email account to talk about harms. And maybe you also offer a confidential support groups to share when we've done harm, allowing us all to kind of come together and say, you know, I did this harm and I want to change. So I think those are just some options. So I want to encourage you to spend a little time right now really thinking about what might be some of the starting points for your community. What might be some small steps using tools that have worked in the past, given the time that you think your community has to offer. Where can you start? Where is your passion? And like I said, this is a small list. Your community is the expert on your community, so you know what ways you can best support people in your community.
Great. So I'm going to pause there again, and actually going to see if I can share screen back to what the questions were. So give me 1 second. Stop share. So this is, folks should be able to see my screen. So these are the questions for phase 3, and I'm going to follow a similar format of setting up a timer. I had written down, and I think it's a good example to bring in right now, which is Elena had asked a question. One major disagreement I see in my community is about the need for punishment as a means for victim satisfaction. Even with restorative justice programs being presented as alternatives, most female friends / colleagues still feel the need to rely on punishment to feel vindicated. Do you have any insights on how to break that? So this is a good example for us, I think, on starting small. We, as a collective, mostly volunteer with, or not mostly, we volunteer only with people who are opting into asking us for help. So when we're supporting victims, they're choosing to come to us for help, and they know that we're not going to involve the police or these things. So for us, even though Elena, what you pointed out is an amazing future and something that we need to address. That's a good example for us of having to start small and realizing that we weren't able to begin there or to tackle that or to chew that off at the start. So I wanted to present that as an example of something we've had to not fully be able to address yet. So I'm going to set the timer for another 4 to 5 minutes, and I think these questions are great. So keep posting them, or also if anyone has any resources that they want to post or any starting points that they're considering, those would be really helpful for others in the group to see. Great. So we're at about the almost 5 minute mark. I'm gonna give maybe 1 more minute for anyone to share out any implementation ideas that that they really enjoyed brainstorming or found to be worth sharing. Great. I'm going to pass this back over to Autumn.
Okay, so we've now had phase 1 community conversations and dialogues. We've distilled those into goals and priorities and shared critiques. We have actually started doing the work. We've done something. We've created a plan and we've acted on it. We've started a monthly support group. We have done open salons once a week on topics of harm and consent and transformation and alternative systems and police-free universes. So now that your communities have been doing that, what happens next? Do we just keep going forever and ever? And in our experience and our advice, the answer is sort of yes and no. The answer is let's evaluate. And we think that it's vital to evaluate the systems that our communities have created and check in with ourselves, our goals, our priorities, and our critiques. This is partially because systems of oppression and harm are constantly creeping into our work, and we must be prepared to see our wrongs and fix them. And so, you know, we all have been raised and brought up in racist and sexist systems, ableist systems, and we've been brought up in these systems of oppression, and they creep into our work despite our best effort. And additionally, you know, in the implementation phase, we can sometimes forget what our goals are. So it's important to go back to those goals. It does not mean that if you are doing work and you come back to check your goals and they don't align, that you have to stop doing what you're doing. It just means you have to note that your goals are now out of alignment with your activity, and which one seems to change. Do you have new goals? Does your community have a new priority? That's totally fine. So some options we've used for evaluating our processes are anonymous feedback forms from folks who've used our systems, self-evaluations from core team members on our own efforts and on the project as a whole. And the last one we've tried is public dialogues and open discourses. And there's a small warning here, which is that these can be difficult. Sometimes, you know, what we're doing the community likes, but maybe doesn't support entirely. Sometimes only part of the community might support completely police-free alternatives. People have a myriad of different ideas about how harms should be responded to and prevented, and that is okay. But also, you know, the current systems that exist today have a lot of power in the way people think about harms. They've, you know, been in existence for a long time and have really formed and shaped people's opinions. And so when we open public dialogues and open discourses, we make sure that we're prepared that, you know, some of those evaluations might not be constructive in terms of they might come from a position that says something that opposes our shared critiques or our values or our goals. And that's okay, people can voice those, but that when the evaluation that we're talking about here is, if everyone agrees on these shared critiques, how do they think that we're doing, right? It is not a time for argument about whether or not a sort of alternative justice's approach is appropriate. And I think that you can have those dialogues. Those are also really important. They're really useful in the community dialogues phase to figure out what kind of processes you want. They're less helpful once you've already decided to embark on this adventure and then want to rehash that. But if you have large public discourses, those critiques may come up again. And that's I'll say a risky run. And we always try when we do these kind of things to prepare the people who are sort of leading that discussion or representing our project to be prepared for a lot of possible vitriol, some anger, and just to know how to deal with that and know that they're supported in sort of taking that on. We have written up a bunch of our critiques. They're available on our Medium, and the link for our Medium is at the end of this presentation. But we take our critiques really seriously, and we try to publish them openly so that people can read about them and see them, and also so that the people who feel that we aren't doing the best we could in our communities know that we've heard their feedback and hear what we're trying to do to listen to that. So now's a great time to just think about not so much what the feedback might be, but to think about what's an easy way in your community to get feedback on something you're working on. Do you already have a system for this? When someone wants to throw an event, do you have a feedback system? Have you never critiqued each other? Have you never evaluated your own projects? What might that look like? So now's a great time to spend a few minutes just writing down some notes on how, or thinking it through how community and self-evaluation in a project like this might work.
Great, so I'm gonna pause here again and again give maybe like 5 to 6 minutes for people to jot down some thoughts. And I'm gonna expand a tiny bit on what Autumn said. So I think you can both reflect on kind of how you might collect feedback. As Autumn mentioned, for us, we have a feedback form. Often when we start working with someone as a volunteer, we might tell them, hey, here's other people in the collective that you could talk to if this isn't going well, and give feedback to. On a very personal level for myself as a volunteer, it was important to figure out what resources I would need to be capable of receiving feedback. So for me, that looks like having 2 very, very value aligned friends and a Slack channel where I can ask them to help reflect on feedback with me. For me, it also looks like having a therapist. So yeah, great time to kind of reflect on what Autumn shared. Hopefully those are some helpful examples too. And as before, please share things in the chat as they come up so we can all learn from one another. And I'm going to go ahead and share in the chat the Medium article that Autumn was referring to of critiques that we have received already. Great. I'm gonna give just one more minute in case anyone wants to share any ideas or questions around some options on how to create like what type of evaluation system you might or you think you might enjoy, or any ideas around how to, even on an individual level, be emotionally ready for being on the receiving end of evaluations. And I shared in the chat a lot of the critiques that we have gotten, and I think one major learning I think Autumn was speaking to is that receiving critiques hopefully shouldn't mean that you stop doing the work. It's okay to be imperfect. Great. I'm going to continue the video. Thanks, Selena, for sharing that that thought. I think it's a great example of creating shared language around giving feedback, so that giving the feedback can be a lot easier because you at least have a language for sharing it quickly. Great. I'm going to unpause Autumn so you can keep going.
So we've done a ton of stuff. We've gone through phase 1 of community dialogues, phase 2 of goals, priorities, and shared critiques, phase 3 of implementation, phase 4 of evaluation, and now we're at phase 5, which is evolution. So this is really just what it sounds like. This is how will you learn from the critiques and evaluations that you've done. Are there ways that you can do what you've been doing that are even less harmful? Who needs to hear about what you're doing? Where and how can you share what you've learned? And the reminder here really is that after you've evaluated, after you've looked at what you've been doing for a little while, just remember that bigger does not equal better. You know, that's a kind of capitalist idea that sometimes invades our communities, and it's okay, but these are huge systemic issues that we're trying to tackle. And so it's okay to be small. It's okay if the next iteration of your community project is smaller, easier, simpler. It is really about evolving in a way that grows with your community based on the feedback that you're getting and the feedback that you're giving yourself. And so this is, yeah, just, this one's a kind of dream, right? It's like in the future, what might be another way? And, you know, what's nice for right now is that as you have kind of gone on a journey to think through what might be some critiques, what might be some ways to get critiques, now you can start thinking about what would be some other implementation methods. And, you know, that brings you back to phase 3. You can use those in the implementation phase this first time if you want. So now's a good time just to jot a few more ideas down. Think about what the future might look like.
Gosh, 1 second can make a large difference. Great. So yeah, I'm gonna give us, I think I'm gonna give us a bit less time on this one, so we have some time to discuss at the end. Also, because I think figuring out evolution's a little bit harder to predict. But I'll still maybe give a few minutes for people to reflect on these questions before we move on. And something that could be helpful, since a lot of you all might be reading these questions without having received any of the evaluations or critiques yet, since you're at the starting phase, would be even to reflect on, in the past, what have been great precursors for making critiques or evaluations really beneficial to you. Sometimes even thinking through past positive experiences or negative experiences and trying to discern some good predictors can be helpful. Great. So I'm going to have us continue on to phase 6. Sorry in advance, we might re-listen to a small bit of before since.
You back to phase 3. You can use those in the implementation phase this first time if you want. So now's a good time just to jot a few more ideas down. Think about what the future might look like. So we wanted to offer just a few last guiding little thoughts as we go on our journeys in thinking about these systems of community transformation and harm prevention and harm response and accountability. So any attempt is helpful as long as we share our learnings. And this work is important, it is vital, it is difficult, it is complex, it is, new, it is old, it is everything. And so, the more we share with one another, even though that's hard, even though that can feel very vulnerable, the more we share, the more impact our work has, because then we learn from each other. And that's how we all grow, even despite our differences across miles and generations. All our communities can just really grow and learn together. It is really important to constantly check our own biases. We mentioned this in the evaluation section, but we live in societies built on oppression, and none of us are free from that yet. And so our biases creep into our work. And so the more we can check in on those biases, the better our work will be and the more free we will all get. This work can seem daunting, but doing it as a community makes things so much easier. Whether it's acknowledged or not, people in your community are doing this work already. That's what we found. That's what we've seen in many, many communities. Someone is helping victim survivors through harm. Someone is helping people who have done harm through their transformation. Someone is already doing this work. And doing it acknowledged as a whole community together makes things so much easier for the people who are already doing the work, and for those of us who feel like we maybe don't know how to do that work. It really helps to do things as a community together. The solution best suited to your community is the one your community creates. We really believe in sort of helping communities have tools to create their own systems, but your community, again, is an expert on itself. You all know yourselves. And so the solution you create is the best one for your community because it came from your community. And to that end, we say be modular, be flexible, be ready to change. Communities are constantly changing, but also being modular, having things done in parts, in little sections, helps in case, the person who's really passionate about something doesn't have time for it, and that maybe that module needs to go, but the rest of the system doesn't crumble. So by being modular and flexible and ready to change, we sort of help ourselves and our communities create more resilient systems. So you can learn more about the Alternative Justices Project at our website, which is alternativejustices.com, or on our Medium channel. So you can just search the Alternative Justices Project on Medium, and all our articles are free there. And you can also support our work by donating to our sponsoring organization, which is District Commons. And that website is www.districtcommons.org. We are sort of fiscally, socially sponsored by that organization, and that is a small community nonprofit that helps us do our work. And thank you all so much for being in this struggle together, for recognizing all of our humanity together, and for listening to what we all have learned so far doing this work. And we wish you the best of luck. I always like to say, take everything you've heard here and break it, destroy it, and build it new for you. So thanks so much, and wishing you all the best.
Awesome. So I think we have about 10 minutes left. And yeah, something that I realized from the chat messages that might have been a tiny bit confusing for some of this idea of community. And Elena had said that we'd get back to the question that you'd posted on, can you as a member of the collective facilitate a community dialogue somewhere else rather than your own community, or how do you transfer that knowledge to the ones that are going to do it? When alternative justice first started, it largely came, a lot of the volunteers live in cooperatives and intentional communities in the Bay Area. And we noticed a lot of harm happening in our community spaces. And it was particularly difficult to deal with in the context of a lot of people living together, and it being, harm being done within friends, and people moving from house to house. And so I would say, at least for this project, it's gone from that very immediate community to there's sometimes being people who find our website and say, like, hey, there's just no one else doing something similar. I don't want to use the police system, but I'm in another state, and we've chosen to volunteer and help those people, knowing that at that point we're not really that we need to be a lot more guided by them, since it's not our direct community. So it's a little bit fluid. And in terms of transferring knowledge, I think we mostly do our best to just document and share, and come to spaces that are so wonderfully hosted like this one, so we can try to get information out to people. Beyond that, I wanted to know if there was anything, and you can be as critical as you feel comfortable with, if there's anything where you're like, wow, this thing should have been included, or we were joking last night when we were prepping for this that we just made these pages. So if anyone has any reflections on things that would be great to add, or any questions that came up, or things that you want to reflect on, we can use the last few minutes for that.
And just a note, if you want to share your video to be more interactive, you can put a question mark in the chat and we can unmute you, or you can turn on your video, but remember that we're recording. I see the question, are you accepting volunteers? I'm from Canada, would be interested in helping out in some way.
That's awesome. We probably have many things that we could use help with. I would recommend emailing. So on our website, there should be an email. And yeah, that would be fantastic. that is something that we've had to work on too, is also just having like different levels of participation. And I think that kind of goes to the, I forget what phase it was, where the one where you kind of decide what steps to start taking. Sometimes even having someone volunteer to, I started once just by having to Google a lot of resources for someone and just make a resource sheet. So there's tons of different types of work to be done.
I can read the questions aloud if you'd like, Andrea. Aren't there countless people who don't feel part of any community and thus don't have a stake in voluntarily participating in transformative work? And or do you not trust an unknown or do not trust an unknown community to support one when harmed?
Yeah, I think that's extremely valid and likely true. I would say most people who have trusted us in the past, often it's been through word of mouth. It's been like someone having a positive experience, and then when they meet someone else, reaching out. And some of that is also just figuring out things like outreach. Support circles for us have been really great for that. Actually have a support circle for formerly incarcerated folks, and we noticed a lot of people would start just bringing their friends. So that's a great way to help with that. But yeah, that can be, the aspect of community can be really difficult, and in particular, if someone's going through a really difficult thing in their life, you can see where it would be difficult to trust someone new, or to even just not isolate in that moment.
So Andrea, I think you said you meant to return to a question in the Q&A.
I think I did. That's the one I started with from Elena in terms of transferring knowledge. I also realize Abby's on this call. Abby, I don't know if it's okay for me to put you on the spot, but Abby's actually someone who's an academic who's been volunteering with alternative justice. If you want to do a quick intro on your work. Yeah.
Hi everyone. I'm Abby. I use she, her pronouns, and I've been working with the Alternative Justice Project and other transformative justice projects to kind of explore what they're doing and how we can put abolitionist principles into practice. So it's been really interesting seeing, I've been with them for a year and a half now, seeing the growth of the project, both in terms of figuring out what resources are needed in their community and learning from various stages of the project. So yeah, happy to be here and always love being around other abolitionists.
Yeah, Abby's a great, almost like objective third party observer and source of knowledge and support for us. Great. If no one has any more questions, I've heard rumors that Zoom fatigue might be a problem. So I'm okay with ending 3 minutes early. Thank you everyone so much for showing up, for putting time into this, and for sharing your questions and your reflections. I definitely feel like I learned a lot. I took notes. I'm really excited to share them with everyone else. And our website and everything is online, so you can contact us. And we also, the conference did a great job of posting that presentation online too. So that's on their site. Thanks everyone, and thank you, Jen and all the interpreters for supporting all of this.
Yeah, and on behalf of the Imagining Abolition conference organizing team, thanks so much, Andrea, and everyone at the Alternative Justices Project for this phenomenal workshop. Thanks participants for participating, and our ASL interpreters for helping with access tonight. All right, I think that's it. Have a great break before our next session, everyone.